I let my son and daughter-in-law move in after their eviction. One morning, I woke up to find the locks changed and a note on the door that read, "We're upgrading the house without you in it." When I called my son, he said coldly, "It's her house now, Dad." I slept in my car that night, but before sunrise, I sent one document that would. I watched my key scrape uselessly against the lock for the third time, my hand starting to shake not from the cold October morning, but from something else entirely, something that felt like ice water replacing the blood in my veins. The brass gleamed differently than I remembered, newer, foreign, and when I pressed my face close, I could see the inside mechanism was completely different from the one I'd installed myself 15 years ago, when we first worried about break-ins in the neighborhood. That's when I saw the paper taped at eye level, white printer paper with words that made my vision blur at the edges. "We're upgrading the house without you in it." I read it twice, then 3 times, certain my 67-year-old eyes were playing tricks, but the letters stayed exactly the same, each one a small knife. My first instinct was to kick the door down because I'm Arthur Grayson, and I've never been the type to think things through when my temper flares, a trait that cost me friendships and job opportunities over the years, but my bad knee reminded me those days were long past. I'm stubborn as a rusted bolt, and twice as hard to move once I've made up my mind about something, which means I've missed out on compromises that might have saved relationships, might have kept my marriage from falling apart 20 years back, might have helped me see what was coming with my own son. My phone felt heavy as lead when I pulled it from my jacket pocket, thumb fumbling over Elliot's contact photo, the one from 5 years ago when he still smiled at me like I was someone worth respecting. The phone rang once, twice, and I counted each tone like heartbeats while standing on my own porch feeling like a stranger at a stranger's door. "Dad," Elliot's voice came through flat and distant like he was reading from a script someone else wrote. "What the hell is this, Elliot? Why can't I get into my own house?" I heard my voice crack on the last word, hatting myself for showing weakness but unable to stop it because that's another one of my flaws. I wear my heart too exposed, and people know exactly where to strike. There was a pause long enough for me to hear traffic in his background, which meant he wasn't even home, wasn't even in my house, was somewhere else entirely while I stood locked out like yesterday's trash. "Because it's not your house anymore, Dad. It's Leela's now." The words came out matter-of-fact, casual, like he was telling me about a change in the weather, rather than ripping away the foundation of my entire existence. "What do you mean it's Leela's house? I own this house. I paid it off 20 years ago. I have the deed in my filing cabinet right there in my office." My voice rose higher and I knew I sounded desperate but couldn't stop myself because desperation was replacing the shock now, hot and acidic in my throat. "Had the deed, Dad, past tense. Things changed." Elliot's voice carried an edge now, something cold and rehearsed like he'd practiced this conversation. "You can't just change ownership of a house without, Elliot, this is illegal. You can't lock me out of my own property." I was gripping the phone so hard my knuckles hurt. "It's handled, Dad. Leela's been working on this for months. Everything's legal. You should probably find somewhere else to stay." Months, the word hit me like a physical blow. They'd been planning this for months while I cooked them dinners, while I gave them space and privacy, while I pretended not to notice Leela's barely concealed contempt every time I asked about their job search or their plans for finding their own place. "Elliot, I'm your father. I took you in when you got evicted. I gave you everything." The words sounded pathetic even to my own ears, but I couldn't stop them from tumbling out. "And we appreciate that, Dad, really, but it's time for you to move on. This house has too many bad memories for you anyway. Mom dying here and everything. This is actually better for everyone." My ex-wife's death was a card I knew he'd play eventually, because Elliot learned long ago that bringing up Sarah was the fastest way to shut me down, to make me back off from any argument, but this time the manipulation felt too naked, too calculated. "Don't you dare bring your mother into this. She would be ashamed of you right now." My temper was fully flaring now, the stubborn, angry part of me that makes me say things I regret later, and I heard Elliot sigh on the other end like I was being the unreasonable one. "I have to go, Dad. Leela's waiting for me. We'll talk later when you've calmed down." The line went dead before I could respond. I stood there staring at my phone for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, watching my reflection in the darkened screen like it might offer answers. Through the front window I could see movement inside, shapes passing behind the new curtains that I'd never seen before, cream-colored and expensive-looking where my old blue ones used to hang. Leela's laugh drifted out faintly. High and bright like this was the best day of her life, and maybe it was because she'd just stolen a house without firing a single shot. My hands were shaking again, and this time I let them because standing still felt impossible. Action felt necessary, even though I had no idea what action to take. I walked back to my car parked at the curb, my 2008 sedan with the passenger door that stuck and the heater that only worked on high, and I sat in the driver's seat with my hands on the wheel going nowhere. The sun set slowly that evening, painting the sky in oranges and purples that felt like mockery, because how dare the world be beautiful when mine was ending? I tried calling Elliot 6 more times, but each call went straight to voicemail like he'd turned off his phone or blocked my number, and each rejected ring made my chest tighter until breathing felt like work. Around 9 that night, I reclined the driver's seat as far as it would go, which wasn't far because the back was full of electrical supplies I'd never bothered to clean out from my working days, and I tried to sleep while watching my house through the windshield. The porch light glowed warm and yellow, the same light I'd installed and replaced bulbs in for 2 decades, and I wondered if Leela knew that the timer switch was finicky and needed to be jiggled just right, or if she'd just think it was broken and replace it without understanding its quirks. Probably replace it. That seemed to be her solution for everything, including me. I must have dozed off because suddenly the sky was that particular shade of grey-blue that comes just before dawn, cold and unforgiving, and my neck ached from the angle and my bad knee was screaming from being bent in the car all night. My laptop was still in the trunk, because I'd been planning to take it to the library to help Mrs. Henderson set up her email before all this happened, back when my biggest problem was whether to have oatmeal or eggs for breakfast. I pulled it out and balanced it on my steering wheel, the screen too bright in the pre-dawn darkness, and opened the folder I'd labeled House Documents 5 years ago when I'd gotten paranoid about digital record keeping. There it was. The life estate deed I'd filed 8 months ago after my lawyer Dana Morales had convinced me to do some estate planning when I'd mentioned Elliot was having financial troubles. Arthur, if you're worried about creditors coming after the house, a life estate protects you, Dana had said in her office with its fake plants and motivational posters. You transfer ownership but retain the right to live here until you die. Nobody can touch it, including your son's debts. I'd been hesitant because it felt like giving up control, which goes against every stubborn fiber of my being, but Dana was sharp and practical, and I trusted her even though trusting people hasn't always worked out well for me. I'd signed the papers and filed them with the county, and then mostly forgotten about them, because Elliot moved in shortly after and life got complicated in different ways. But now, staring at the document on my laptop screen, I realized that Leela had made a crucial mistake. She'd assumed the house was transferred completely. She'd assumed I had no legal recourse. She'd assumed I was just a helpless old man who would roll over and accept defeat. My stubborn streak, the same one that ruined my marriage because I refused couples counseling, the same one that cost me a promotion because I wouldn't apologize to a supervisor who was clearly wrong. That same immovable stubbornness suddenly felt like the best trait I'd ever possessed. I attached the life estate deed to an email and sent it to 3 people with shaking fingers that had nothing to do with cold this time. County Clerk Miriam Holtz, who I'd met several times when filing permits for electrical work. Dana Morales, my lawyer who I hoped checked email this early. And Elliot, because he needed to see what was coming even if he wouldn't believe it until it hit him. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of cheap motel rooms and fast food eaten cold, because I couldn't trust my hands to carry hot coffee without spilling. Dana called me back within hours of my email, her voice urgent and angry in equal measure. Arthur, what the hell happened? Are you safe? The concern in her voice almost broke me because I'd been holding everything together with pure spite, and one genuine emotion might shatter the facade. They locked me out, Dana. Changed the locks and told me the house is theirs now. I heard her sharp intake of breath. That's illegal eviction. Doesn't matter what they think they own, you have occupancy rights until death according to that life estate. Did they file any paperwork with the county? I didn't know. I didn't know anything anymore except that my son had chosen his wife over his father and that betrayal tasted like copper in my mouth. Dana took over with the kind of efficiency that reminded me why I paid her retainer even in retirement. She filed emergency motions, contacted the county clerk, discovered that Leela had indeed filed ownership transfer documents, but they were incomplete and improperly executed, missing crucial signatures and notarization. She tried to forge your signature on a quitclaim deed, Dana told me 3 days later, her voice tight with controlled fury. It's pretty obvious when you compare it to your actual signature on file. She didn't even try that hard to make it match. The revelation should have shocked me, but I felt numb by then, hollowed out by sleeping in my car and eating granola bars for dinner and showering at the truck stop off Highway 9, where nobody asked questions if you paid the $5 fee. We prove it, my voice sounded dead even to my own ears. We can prove it. And Arthur, this isn't just a legal eviction anymore. This is fraud, possibly elder abuse depending on how the DA wants to play it. Elder abuse. The words made me feel ancient and helpless, 2 things I'd spent my entire life fighting against because admitting weakness went against everything my father taught me about being a man, which was probably terrible advice but was programmed too deep to shake. I don't want to send my son to jail, Dana. The words came out automatically, but even as I said them I wondered if they were true, if maybe some part of me did want to see Elliot face consequences for once in his life, instead of skating by on charm and excuses like he'd done since high school. That's not your call to make entirely, Arthur. If the county pursues this, it's out of our hands. But right now, let's focus on getting you back in your house legally. Dana's practicality was a lifeline I clung to because making decisions felt impossible when I was this tired. Over the next week, she worked magic with paperwork and court filings while I existed in a fog of waiting. I checked the county property database obsessively, refreshing the page every few hours like it might magically change, and slowly the records began to shift. First, my name reappeared as life estate holder. Then Leela's fraudulent transfer was flagged as pending investigation. Then came the sheriff's office court order for immediate restoration of occupancy rights. 3 weeks after I'd slept in my car staring at my stolen house, I stood on that same porch again, but this time I wasn't alone. Deputy Rowan Pike stood to my left, a calm presence with grey temples and the kind of steady demeanour that suggested he'd seen every flavour of family drama and wasn't impressed by any of it. Deputy Chen was to his right, younger and more nervous, hand resting near his belt like he expected trouble. I wasn't sure what I expected. Part of me, the stubborn, angry part, wanted an explosive confrontation where I could unleash 3 weeks of rage and hurt. Part of me, the tired old man part, just wanted my bed and my coffee maker and the creaky floorboard in the hallway that Sarah and I never fixed because we kind of liked how it announced visitors. Pike knocked firmly, 3 solid raps that sounded like authority, and I heard scrambling inside followed by Leela's voice calling out just a minute. She opened the door wearing yoga pants and a tank top, hair piled on her head, looking irritated until she saw the uniforms, and then her face went through several expressions too fast to track, landing on forced confusion. "Can I help you, officers?" Her voice was sugar-sweet, the same tone she used when asking me to give them just a little more time to get back on their feet, back before I knew that little more time meant forever and getting back on their feet meant stealing my foundation. "Ma'am, I'm Deputy Pike. We have a court order for immediate restoration of occupancy rights to Mr. Arthur Grayson. This is his residence under life estate deed, and you are currently in violation of occupancy terms." Leela's face drained of color so fast I almost felt sorry for her, but then I remembered sleeping in my car and the sympathy evaporated like morning dew. "That's impossible. This house is in my name. I have the deed." Her voice rose higher, taking on a shrill quality that made Pike's expression tighten almost imperceptibly. "Ma'am, the deed you filed was improperly executed and is currently under investigation for fraud. Mr. Grayson holds legal occupancy rights until his death. I'm going to need you to step aside." Elliot appeared behind Leela then, wearing sweatpants and no shirt, looking confused and sleep-crumpled like he'd just rolled out of bed. Our bed, probably. The master bedroom that Sarah and I shared for 30 years until cancer took her and left me alone in a king-size space meant for 2. "What's going on?" Elliot's eyes found me standing behind the deputies, and something flickered across his face, guilt maybe, or annoyance that I hadn't just disappeared quietly like he'd hoped. "Dad, what is this?" His voice carried a whine I recognized from childhood, from every time he got caught doing something wrong and wanted me to fix it without consequences. "This is me coming home, Elliot." My voice came out steady and cold, which surprised me because inside I was shaking with adrenaline and anger and 3 weeks of suppressed everything. "You changed the locks on my house. That's illegal eviction. The court has ordered you to leave immediately." The words felt good coming out, each one a small victory. "You called the cops on us, on your own son." Leela's voice cracked and tears appeared instantly, which might have worked on me once but now just looked like manipulation. "I called a lawyer, she called the court sent the deputies. This is what happens when you commit fraud, Leela." I stepped closer, close enough to smell the coffee brewing in my kitchen, and my temper started heating up despite my best efforts to stay calm. "This is insane. Elliot, tell him. Tell him this is our house now." Leela turned to my son, and I watched him struggle, watched him look between his wife and his father like he could somehow find a third option that wouldn't force him to choose sides. "The court order is clear, ma'am. You need to gather essential belongings and vacate the premises. You'll have supervised access later to collect remaining items, but right now you need to leave." Pike's voice held no room for argument, and I saw the moment Leela realized this wasn't negotiable. "This is bullshit. We've been living here for 6 months. We renovated. We put money into this place." Her voice climbed higher, and I felt my own anger rising to match it, because the audacity of complaining about renovations done to a stolen house was almost impressive. "You renovated my house without permission. You painted over walls my wife chose. You tore out cabinets I installed with my own hands." My voice was getting louder now, and I knew I should stop, knew I was letting my temper get the better of me again like always, but the words kept coming. "You threw me out like garbage after I gave you everything. I took you in when you had nowhere else to go. I fed you. I gave you space and time and patience, and you repaid me by stealing my home." I was shouting by the end, and Pike put a hand up gently, a signal to calm down that I resented even as I recognized its necessity. "Dad, we didn't steal anything. Leela filed the papers legally. Elliot started, but I cut him off with a bark of bitter laughter that hurt my throat. She forged my signature, Elliot. That's fraud. That's a crime. The DA is reviewing the case right now to decide if they want to press charges. That shut him up. I watched my son's face go pale as the implications sank in, watched him turn to Leela with dawning horror. You forged his signature. You told me he agreed to transfer the house. You said you had papers. Elliot's voice was rising now too, and I felt a grim satisfaction watching their alliance crack. I had to. He never would have agreed otherwise, and we deserve this house. We've been taking care of it while he just sat around collecting retirement. Leela's mask was slipping completely now, revealing the calculating coldness underneath. Taking care of it. You've been living here rent-free. I paid every bill, bought every meal, and you couldn't even be bothered to look for jobs. My temper was fully unleashed now, and I knew I should stop. Knew I was saying things that couldn't be unsaid, but 3 weeks of sleeping in my car had burned through my filter. You ungrateful parasites. I gave you everything and you stabbed me in the back. All right, everyone needs to calm down. Pike's voice cut through the rising chaos with practiced authority. Mr. Grayson, I need you to step back, please. Ma'am, sir, you have 30 minutes to pack essential items. Clothing, medications, important documents. Everything else can be collected later under supervision. Leela was crying now, real tears mixed with rage and disbelief. Where are we supposed to go? We don't have anywhere. The irony of her words wasn't lost on me, and I laughed again, sharp and bitter. That's exactly what I said 3 weeks ago when I was sleeping in my car. Funny how things work out. Elliot looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw him seeing me for the first time in months maybe, seeing the weight I'd lost and the dark circles under my eyes and the tremor in my hands that came from stress and cheap coffee and too little sleep. Dad, we can fix this. We can work something out. You don't have to do this. His voice was pleading, and I felt my resolve waver because he's still my son despite everything, still the little boy I taught to ride a bike and throw a baseball and be a decent human being, though clearly I failed at that last part. No, Elliot, we can't fix this. You made your choice when you changed my locks. You made your choice when you told me this wasn't my house anymore. You made your choice when you picked her over me. My voice broke on the last word, and I hated showing weakness, but couldn't help it. I'll get our things. Leela's voice was flat now, defeated or maybe just regrouping for another strategy, and she disappeared into the house, leaving me and Elliot standing in awkward silence with 2 deputies watching our family collapse in real time. I'm sorry, Dad. Elliot's voice was quiet, maybe genuine, but sorry wasn't enough anymore. Sorry doesn't give me back the 3 weeks I spent homeless, Elliot. Sorry doesn't erase you telling me this wasn't my house. Sorry doesn't fix the fact that my own son participated in stealing from me. I felt tears threatening and blinked them back angrily because I refused to cry in front of him, refused to give him the satisfaction of seeing how deeply he'd wounded me. I didn't know she forged your signature. I swear I didn't know. He looked young suddenly, younger than 38, and I wanted to believe him, but trust was a broken thing between us now. Maybe you didn't know about that specific thing, but you knew we were kicking you out. You knew we changed the locks. You knew I called you desperate, and you told me to find somewhere else to stay. You were okay with all of that. The words hung heavy between us, and Elliot had no response because they were true, and we both knew it. 20 minutes later, 2 suitcases sat on my porch, and Leela and Elliot stood beside them looking shell-shocked and furious in equal measure. This isn't over, Leela hissed as she passed me, venom dripping from every word. The DA might press charges for fraud, Leela. So yeah, it might not be over, but probably not in the way you're hopping. I kept my voice level with effort. She opened her mouth to respond, but Elliot grabbed her arm and pulled her toward their car, a newer sedan that I'd helped them get a loan for 6 months ago, another kindness thrown back in my face. I watched them drive away, and then I stood in my doorway, and looked at the destruction they'd left behind. The cream curtains I'd seen from outside, walls painted colors I'd never have chosen, aggressive yellows and grays that made the rooms feel foreign. My filing cabinet in the office stood open, papers scattered like they'd ransacked it looking for documents, probably the original deed. The kitchen cabinets were half torn out, renovation supplies stacked in corners, my house transformed into a construction zone without my permission or input. 3 weeks ago this would have sent me into a rage. Now I just felt tired. Deputy Pike cleared his throat behind me. You okay, Mr. Grayson? I turned to look at him and saw genuine concern in his eyes, which was almost my undoing. I will be. Thank you for your help, Deputy. My voice sounded stronger than I felt. For what it's worth, I've seen a lot of these family situations. What they did locking you out like that was wrong. You were right to pursue this legally. His words were meant to comfort, but they just emphasized how broken everything was, how my family had shattered into legal actions and court orders instead of love and trust. The deputies left, and I was alone in my house that didn't feel like my house anymore, surrounded by evidence of occupation by people who'd tried to erase me from my own history. I spent that first day just walking room to room, cataloguing damage and changes, finding small cruelties like my wedding photo removed from the mantel and my favorite chair replaced with some modern monstrosity that looked uncomfortable and probably cost more than my first car. In the master bedroom, they'd painted over the soft blue Sarah had chosen, covering it with a harsh grey that made the space feel cold. Her jewelry box was gone from the dresser. I found it later in a trash bag in the garage, tossed aside like it was worthless when it contained the only physical pieces of her I had left besides memories. That night I slept in my own bed for the first time in 3 weeks, and I should have felt victorious, but instead I just felt hollow. I'd won legally, I'd gotten my house back, but I'd lost my son in the process, and I wasn't sure the trade was worth it even though I knew I'd had no choice, knew that letting them steal from me would have been worse in the long run. My stubbornness had won out again, my inability to back down even when maybe backing down would have been the kinder option, the more forgiving option. But forgiveness felt impossible when I thought about sleeping in my car, about the fear and uncertainty, and the way Elliot's voice had gone cold when he told me this wasn't my house anymore. The following days brought a parade of complications as I began to understand the full scope of what Leela had done. She'd opened credit cards in my name using the house as collateral. She'd started renovation projects with contractors who now wanted payment for work I'd never authorized. She'd filed for homestead exemptions and property tax changes based on fraudulent ownership documents. Each discovery was another knife wound, another layer of betrayal to process. Dana helped me file disputes and fraud reports, and slowly we began untangling the mess, but it was exhausting work that made me feel every one of my 67 years. The county DA, a stern woman named Patricia Vance, no relation to Leela thank God, called me in for an interview about pressing charges. Mr. Grayson, the evidence of fraud is substantial. Forged signatures, false documents filed with the county, identity theft for the credit cards. We could pursue multiple felony charges. She laid out the case with clinical precision while I sat in her office feeling sick. If you press charges, my son could go to jail too. He lived there, he benefited from the fraud even if he didn't know about all of it. My voice was quiet, and Patricia's expression softened slightly. Your son is an adult who made choices, Mr. Grayson, bad choices that had serious consequences. You're not responsible for protecting him from those consequences. Her words made sense logically, but emotionally they felt impossible. I need time to think about it. I left her office without committing and drove home slowly, thinking about Elliot as a child, about teaching him right from wrong and wondering where I'd failed so spectacularly that he grew into someone who could do this to his own father. 2 months after reclaiming my house, after repainting walls and replacing cabinets and slowly erasing evidence of the invasion, I was sorting through papers in my office when I found something that made my blood run cold. Beneath the life estate paperwork and property documents sat another document, one I didn't remember ever seeing before, a trust amendment dated 2 days before the eviction. I pulled it out with shaking hands and read through legal language that essentially changed my entire estate to pass to Leela directly upon my death, bypassing Elliot entirely. The signature at the bottom looked almost exactly like mine. Almost, but I knew my own signature intimately after 67 years of signing things, and this was close but not quite right. The G in Grayson slightly different, the loop of the Y too large. Someone had tried to forge another document, had tried to ensure that even if the house scheme failed, they'd get everything when I died. The date was key, 2 days before they locked me out, which meant this was premeditated at a level I hadn't fully grasped until now. This wasn't a spontaneous bad decision or Leela getting greedy in the moment. This was a calculated plan with backup strategies and contingencies. My hands shook as I photographed the document and emailed it to Dana with a subject line that just said, "Found another one." She called me within minutes, voice tight with controlled fury. "Arthur, this changes things. This shows clear premeditation and planning. The DA needs to see this immediately." I sat in my office holding my phone and feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on me. I could give this to the DA. I could ensure Leela faced serious charges, possibly Elliot too depending on how much he knew. I could get justice in the legal sense, could watch them face consequences for what they'd tried to do to me. Or I could destroy the document, could pretend I never found it, could try to rebuild some semblance of a relationship with my son, even though I knew it would never be the same. My stubborn streak said pursue it. My tired heart said let it go. I thought about Sarah and what she would want, but Sarah had been the forgiving one, the one who saw the best in people including Elliot, and she wasn't here to guide me through this impossible choice. Dana, send it to the DA, all of it, every document, every piece of evidence. I'm done protecting people who tried to destroy me. The words came out firm and final, and I felt something shift inside me, some last piece of fatherly protection crumbling into dust. Are you sure, Arthur? Once we do this, there's no taking it back. Dana's voice was gentle, but I could hear approval underneath. I'm sure. They made their choices. Now they live with the consequences. I hung up and sat in the silence of my reclaimed house and waited for the storm I'd just unleashed. The charges came down 3 weeks later. Leela was hit with multiple felonies including fraud, identity theft, forgery, and elder abuse. Elliot was charged as an accessory after the fact based on evidence that he'd known about at least some of the forged documents, even if he hadn't created them himself. The news hit me harder than I expected despite being the one who'd set it in motion. I watched the local news report about a local couple charged with attempting to steal a house from an elderly relative and felt disconnected from the story, even though it was my story. My life transformed into a headline and a cautionary tale. Elliot called me the night after his arrest, his voice wrecked with crying and anger and desperation all mixed together. How could you do this to us, Dad? How could you send your own son to jail? The accusations strung even though I'd prepared for it. How could you try to steal my house, Elliot? How could you lock me out and tell me to sleep in my car? How could you watch Leela forge my signature and say nothing? My voice stayed steady with effort. I didn't know about all of it. I swear I didn't know about the trust amendment or the credit cards. He was sobbing now, and part of me wanted to comfort him like I had when he was small and the world hurt him, but I stayed silent. But you knew about some of it. You knew about the occupancy fraud. You knew we were pushing me out illegally. You were okay with that part, Elliot. You told me it wasn't my house anymore. You told me to find somewhere else to stay. You chose this. The words felt like ashes in my mouth. I'm your son. You're supposed to protect me. His voice climbed higher, childish and desperate. You're 38 years old. You're supposed to protect yourself by not committing crimes. I did protect you, Elliot. I protected you your whole life. I bylaid you out of mistakes and covered for your bad decisions and gave you chance after chance. And you used all that protection to hurt me worse than anyone else ever has. The line went quiet except for his breathing. I'll never forgive you for this. Elliot's voice was cold again, the same coldness from when he told me the house was Leela's now. That's your right, just like it was my right to pursue justice when you tried to steal from me. We both made choices, son. Now we both live with them. I hung up before he could respond and sat in the dark living room I'd reclaimed, staring at walls I'd repainted to cover their choices, and wondered if I'd done the right thing or if my stubborn pride had just destroyed what was left of my family forever. The trial took 6 months to work through the system. Leela pleaded guilty to reduced charges and got 3 years probation plus restitution. Elliot got 2 years probation as part of a plea deal for his cooperation in testifying about the timeline of events. I attended every hearing and watched my son sit at the defendant's table looking smaller each time, and I felt no satisfaction in it, just a hollow sense of necessity, like amputating an infected limb to save the body. The judge, an older man with kind eyes, looked at me during sentencing and said, "Mr. Grayson, I'm sorry your family put you through this. What they did was unconscionable. The public acknowledgement of the wrong done to me should have felt validating, but instead just felt sad." Now 8 months after sleeping in my car and a year after Elliot and Leela first moved in, I live alone in my house again. I've repaired most of the damage. The walls are colors I chose. My cabinets are reinstalled. Sarah's jewelry box sits on the dresser where it belongs. I sleep in my own bed and drink coffee from my own machine and walk on the creaky floorboard that announces my presence to empty rooms. Elliot and Leela divorced 4 months after the trial ended, their marriage unable to survive the legal consequences and mutual blame. He sends me texts sometimes, short messages that say things like, "I hope you're happy," or "Was it worth it?" And I don't respond because I don't know how to answer those questions. Was it worth it? I got my house back. I got justice in the legal sense. But I lost my son maybe forever, and the house feels haunted by what happened here, by the betrayal that soaked into the walls like smoke. My stubborn streak went out again, my inability to let things go, my need to fight even when fighting costs me everything else. Some days I think I made the right choice, that standing up for myself was necessary and important, and the only option I had. Other days I wonder if forgiveness would have been stronger, if letting it go would have been the wiser path, even though it would have meant accepting theft and betrayal as the price of keeping family. I found out last week that Elliot moved across the country, to Oregon or Washington, somewhere far from here and from me. A mutual acquaintance mentioned it casually, and I felt the news like a punch to the gut, even though I had no right to be surprised. He's building a life away from the wreckage of what happened here, and I suppose I can't blame him, even though part of me still wants to, still feels that surge of stubborn anger that he gets to run away while I'm stuck living in the crime scene of our broken relationship. The thing nobody tells you about revenge, about justice, about standing up for yourself, is that winning doesn't feel like winning. It feels like surviving. It feels like coming through a war with all your limbs attached, but your spirit broken in ways that don't show on the surface. I was right to fight back. I know I was right. But being right and being happy are two different things, and I'm learning that wisdom came too late to do me any good. I still check the lock on my front door twice before bed, still startle at unexpected knocks, still feel a spike of fear when I see an unfamiliar car parked on my street. The trauma of being locked out of my own home, of being betrayed by my own blood, that doesn't fade just because the legal system validated my pain. Some nights I dream about sleeping in my car and wake up disoriented, unsure if I'm in my bed or still exiled. And it takes minutes for my racing heart to accept that I'm safe, I'm home. I won even if winning feels hollow. The greatest revenge, they say, is living well. So I try. I volunteer at the library teaching seniors how to use computers. I've reconnected with old friends from my electrical days. I tend Sarah's garden that I let go wild during the chaos, but I'm slowly reclaiming, pulling weeds and planting new flowers like I'm trying to grow hope from scorched earth. Some days are good. Some days I don't think about Elliot or Leela or forged signatures or changed locks. Some days I just exist in my house, my legally validated house, and feel something approaching peace. But then I'll find something, some small reminder like Elliot's old baseball glove I saved in the garage, or a photo from a Christmas 10 years ago when he still loved me or thought he did. And the wound opens fresh, and I remember that revenge came at a cost I'm still paying, and will probably pay until the day I die in this house that I fought to keep. I'm Arthur Grayson, and I'm stubborn and flawed, and I stood my ground when my own family tried to bury me. I won, I survived, I'm still here. And some days that has to be enough, even when it feels like nothing at all.